All right, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. To 7 degrees this morning in George. My wife comes from Welcome, it's -9. We've got reasons to be thankful. All right, so today's story is about Korach, Parasha Korach, and it is the portion of scripture from Numbers 16 to 18. And this is normally a time of year that is interesting. And today the story is about the two rebellions of Korach. We know it as the rebellion of Korach, and Korach is set out as being the prime example of what rebellion looks like in the camp of Israel. And but I thought today let's expand on it a little bit. And I think the seeds of rebellion that we find in the life of Korach, and putting a strong arm up in the air and saying that this is my way, I think it started before. And it's not as if Korach got up one morning and he felt that this is now the correct time, this is the right time to enter into contesting the leadership of Moses and Aaron and setting himself up. What was the background? When did this take place? Do you know? Remember we came from the spies, the story of the spies last week. And what was the central idea that resulted from the spies? It was that Israel is turning around. They are not entering the promised land at the moment. Turning around, going back until this generation has been dealt with in the wilderness. So Korach is not set up in a void. This is a people that stands in the wilderness realizing this generation is not to enter the land. And a sense of hopelessness enters your heart, knowing that you are going to endure the wilderness for the rest of your life. So if you look at the background of where they come from, I think it's closer to home than what we think. So it really started with Miriam and Aaron. Remember two weeks ago we spoke about the story of Miriam and Aaron speaking about Moses, the wife of Moshe really. And it was two people that came up against Moses, really Miriam, but she and Aaron agreed, standing up against Moses and proclaiming a message of negativity, hopelessness, that sort of a thing. Last week we dealt with the spies, two people coming with a good message, 10 with a less good message about the land that the Father promised. And this week we've got Korach. So the seeds of rebellion and negativity really started way back in the time of Miriam. And it's growing. Remember Miriam was dealt with. She had tzara'at, she was 7 days outside of the camp, she was restored, and she's healed. And we are going forward. What about the people around her? What are their hearts like? And we are affected by certain things that happens in members of the community and people around us. Our hearts are affected. And if we don't walk this walk with the Father and with each other, and we receive healing and we are transparent, then we sit with a problem not long from now. And this is what we saw in the life of the spies last week and Miriam's lives way back when, not so long ago though, in their perspective. And this week it's Korach. So I think the first thing is that I saw is that Miriam and Aaron was close family that came up against Moses. His closest family in the wilderness. Then last week's story was about the spies that were set out by the leadership of Israel to go and spy out, to tour the land, to come back with a good message. So this was really the report of those that represents the nation. And this week it's about the priesthood. So it's in all aspects of life that it's a package that our Father shows to us in 3 weeks in this portion of scriptures that is dealing with rebellion in our hearts. Rebellion is not a very good thing. Rebellion is as witchcraft. So it really speaks to who we are and how do we see the Father and how do we see everything working out and how are we responding as a community. Remember, the whole story with Korach ended in 14,000 people being judged by the Father. Started with the close family, grew out into a nation, and now the priesthood and the people of Israel. That was the fruit of the second rebellion. Because remember, Korach stood against Moshe and Aaron, spoke against them, went back, and afterwards the people stood up. But we'll get to that. So Korach and his followers have come under the power of resentment. Resentment. And as the people embraced this idea, it grew into open rebellion. So if we're living through things, if we are seeing things that we live in, how do we feel? Is there certain resentment that grows in our heart, certain negative ideas about our experience, and we need to guard against it? Because we spoke about it earlier this morning about kindness. Kindness, that's one of the first things, one of the least commandments, that we are to be kind to each other, and as we are kind to each other, it facilitates love and compassion and the other things that's needed for a relationship to grow. So the portion from Numbers 15 to 18 is really summed up from Numbers 15 verse 1 and to Numbers 18 verse 32, sort of a chiastic structure. And if you don't know what a chiastic structure is all about, let me just give you a quick idea. The first portion of this scripture that's in the structure is included deals with the laws about free will offerings, etc. So we'll find a corresponding idea on the end, which is the laws about tithing and offerings from the Levites. So it works its way from the inside to a central idea. And usually the central idea is the focus of what the Father wants to communicate to us in this portion. And the center pivot or the central idea is the Father's commandment in Numbers that says that we should wear tzitzit with blue in the piece of garment on the four corners of your garment that we're wearing. For what purpose? Why do people wear tzitzit? It says in Numbers 15:40, that you may remember and do all my commandments and be set apart. The crucial idea is how do we get past all of the things that are set up in our own lives when we focus on our own lives, to get over it, to deal with it, to go forward, to walk as a community together. Is when we choose to act. Remember the word zachar, to remember? When we choose to act upon all the things that the Father instructs us to do, and to be living a life for His goodness and His mercy and His glory, glorifying His name, then we will get over the problems that exist in our midst. Is we're not focused inwardly, but we're focused on the good of the one that walking next to us and on the love of the Father. So Korach comes and he lodges a complaint. With what type of a heart did he lodge the complaint? A heart of humbleness, of compassion? It's not that at all. In fact, it is described as an argument not for the sake of heaven. It is an argument that was for the sake of his own experience. Of a rebellious nature that was stirred in the camp because they've got to turn around, walk in the wilderness, and he facilitates this. It wasn't an argument for the sake of our Father, it was for the individuals that were unsettled in the camp. So what was Moses' reaction? 16 verse 4 says that he fell on his face. And it means, it's actually summed up in 20 verse 6 that says he prostrated himself before our Father. That's what it means. It says that when he heard this Korach accusation, the complaint that Korach had, he went back and he prostrated himself before the Father and saying, I haven't got the answer. It's not about me, it's about you. And I think if we can have the attitude. Many times I was thinking of discussions that we had with individuals and things that happened even in this community. If I had more of that attitude, maybe we would have had less problems. You know? Maybe it's something each one of us can learn, is how do we enter into an argument if there is an argument that develops? How do we respond? What is our responsibility? Is to go back to the Father and ask Him what is His solution to this problem. That's what He did in 16 verse 5 and 7. He instructed Korach and the company to bring incense. You remember, to bring incense and to bring it before the Father so that the Father can resolve the matter. But he asked Korach, he said, remember Korach was part of the Kohathites. Okay, what was the Kohathites' responsibility in the tabernacle setup? What did they do? Remember, they were to carry the furnishings. After Gershon and Merari has folded up everything and put it away and everything was sorted and we are ready to go, they pick up the Ark of the Covenant. They carrying the furnishings to go ahead and to walk in the closeness and with her Father. They had a special privilege in the camp. And this is why Moses could ask him. He says, are you seeking the priesthood also? Do you want to are you not satisfied with what the Father has given you as a task? And sometimes we are not dissatisfied, but we don't really know what the task is that the Father has given us. And we criticize people that is living out what the Father is doing in their lives, rather than standing in our own number nines and doing what the Father has laid out for you as a task. So, what was Korach's view of leadership? He asks the question to Moses. He says, why did you lift yourself up above anyone else? Why did he see Moses in this way? If the word says that Moses was the most humble of anyone who ever lived in that period, why would he see Moses doing that? What do you think? Any suggestions? Sien? Okay, so I agree he didn't accept the position that our Father put Moses in. Why wouldn't he accept that? Maybe he was envious. He was envious of the position that Moses had, and he had a wrong view of leadership. And maybe this is part of the story, is that he saw leadership as a term of status. Someone is looking for his daddy. And I think this is, if this is the way that we view leadership, you're always going to sit with this problem. And looking at leadership, why don't they do this and why don't they do this? And they are like Nathan and Dathan and Abiram lording over the people. So then Nesiim, the 250 leaders, it says that they are the leaders, the princes. A prince in Hebrew is Nesiim, it's a Nasi. And I think they are, a Nasi is said to be someone who is lifted up. And you can view it in two ways, really. Someone that is elevated, lifted up, or someone that's doing the work of lifting up. So depending on your interpretation, is how do we view this? So what we did is in our congregation is in our diagram, in the way that we approach it, is we try to facilitate, as leadership, we are trying to facilitate the growth of the community from the bottom up. So I hope that you don't see the leadership of this community to be downwards, trying to enforce something, but that the leadership of the community is trying to facilitate growth and encourage the community to live the life that the Father has called us to do. And with our Father's grace and mercy, we are trying to live out His calling in our lives and help everyone to live out His purpose and calling that the Father has enabled us to do. So, it says of Moses that he was more humble than anyone else. And I think Sien is reg in my... Sien is correct, that it says that his heart was a problem. Right from the very beginning, I think his heart was a problem. And when he looks at Moses, you can see that he's envious of the leadership position. Moses was a prophet. Aaron was a priest. And the prophet speaks the word of the Father at the time that he hears it, to be able to lead the nation. That's what Moses' job was. The Kohanim, or the priests, spoke the word of our Father at all times to facilitate worship and to bring the nation closer to our Father. But I think the crucial element of this is neither of them authored the word. We are just facilitators. We're just trying to help to draw people closer to our Father in our interpretation, in the application of that what the Father is doing in our lives. So as long as we can see that none of us have the authority or the position of lording anything over someone else, then we're in a good place. So, C.S. Lewis had some wise words. He says, the place of the grave begins with a grumbling mood, always complaining and always blaming others. And I think this was true of Miriam when she spoke to Aaron. It was true of the spies, and it is true of Korach's people. So the moment that we are finding our hearts to be grumbling, to be complaining, to be negative, then just think of the commandments, what our Father leads us, where He's taking us, what's our purpose, on who shall we focus, where are we going as a community together. Okay, so it's difficult to speak about Korach and maintain a very positive, upbeat situation, don't you think? There was a trend in their lives. And Hebrews 12 verse 15 sums it up. It says, see to it that no one falls short of the grace, of the favor of our Father, and that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble. So if there's a root of bitterness that's springing up somewhere, see to it that no one misses the favor of our Father. So in our dealings with one another, if you see there is something that's worrying the other person, what shall we do? We must come with love and compassion and kindness and wash that clean so that the root of bitterness will not find any root in our lives, so that people will become defiled, but that we can flow in what the Father has for us as a community together. Okay, so because the problem is that bitterness, it's only going one direction, and it leads to separation. Separation leads to uprising, a little group forming, and they are talking negative ideas to one another, and certainly it will cause a problem. Uprising to accusation to rebellion, and we know that rebellion is not leading to life. So, interesting thing about Korach and his family. How did they end? They ended up closer to the earth than what they thought they would. Okay? So, Aretz is the word for earth. And it was said about Abraham in Genesis 12 verse 1, that Abraham is to go forth from your land. Martzecha, it's the word. It's to go forth from the land, from the Aretz. Okay? Where is he going? He's going to a place where the Father has prepared for him. His calling is a calling that the Father has laid on his life to walk in the land that the Father has called him, to proclaim His name and to glorifying His name. That's where he's going. From your land, from the earth. So there's a Hebrew word artziut, and it's defined as earthliness, earthly ideas, things that derives from the earth around us. Okay? So artziut. It is not heavenly, spiritual ideas. It's the things that we are busy with. Things of business, of where we are walking, thinking. And if we dwell too much in earthly ideas, if we do not have a heavenly, spiritual perspective of what we are going through in these days, what we are living in, then it's going to draw us away. It's going to draw us away from giving our Father glory and honor for what we are experiencing. Okay? Whether in good or in bad, we know that the Father is involved in our lives and He will lead us down the path closer to Him. Okay, so this is why they reckon that Korach became engulfed with this idea of earthliness, and he lost the ability to see the application that the Father had for Moses and the nation, and that's why the Arets beneath him opened up its mouth and swallowed him, and the houses and the men, all the men that was with him in his camp and their property. So he ended up in a dark place. So he was not heavenly minded. Although he was part of the priesthood, he didn't see the goodness and the mercy and the love that the Father has invested in him to walk forward in glorifying the Father. He was focused on himself, earthly ideas. So there were 3 groups of people with Korach. And I think from the 3 groups of people, the grouping, we can get an idea who they were and what the core problem was. Firstly, it was Korach. He was from the tribe of Levi, and we know the Levitical focus is in worshiping our Father, facilitating worship. You agree? This is the core reason and calling for Levi is to facilitate worship. Yes, the Kohanim, the priests are first and upmost in the temple, in the tabernacle, in bringing the sacrifices and lighting the menorah and bringing the incense, everything. And then there are the guys that's bringing the wood, Merari, and then there are the Kohathites, everyone playing a role. And so it is here. Everybody is playing a role to facilitate our worship and to facilitate our gathering together. Korach was from that tribe. Dathan and Aviram, they were from Reuben. And it's interesting that it's from Reuben because he was actually the firstborn. He was the firstborn son of Jacob. Why wasn't he recognized as the firstborn? Can you remember? Because he had a little encounter with a concubine of his father Jacob. And so his firstborn right was withdrawn, given to Judah. But now, the people that are leading the camp spiritually is Levi, because of the fact that at the golden calf incident, the Levitical order stood with Moses against the idolatry that was in the camp, and the firstborn right of priesthood was taken away and given to Levi. So we see all of those realities playing a role here. Korach in the tribe of Levi, Dathan and Aviram from Reuben, who feels that they must be recognized for being the firstborn. And the 250 Nesiim, remember those guys, the leaders from different tribes, feels that Levi isn't the proper priesthood. They should be the priests. So it's all a rebellion against the authority that our Father has put in place. So Dathan and Aviram says, why do you lord your authority over us? Korach says, what are you doing? Where are you leading us? So there's a common attack on what the Father is doing in the camp. Korach says, why then do you set yourself above our Father's assembly? Why does he say that? Is there a precedent for saying this? There is actually. He's quoting scripture. Because Moshe said in Exodus 19, I think it says the whole nation is set apart. Everybody is set apart in view of the Father. So Korach comes with the accusation, you are elevating yourself above a set apart congregation. But he's turning it into a way that the application is not true. Dathan and Aviram says, and now you want to lord it over us, your authority, the way that we are going. So if Moshe has embodied humility, how can this be true? His view of leadership was the Torah view, to humble yourself and to lead the way through servitude, the servant heart. Their view was the opposite. Because actually what they wanted to do is to set themselves above the people, and in terms of authority that they will apply, lord it over the people. So what was in their hearts, they just lived out. They projected it onto Moses. We'll get to the positive part now, just now. What was the surprising end to Korach's rebellion? What do you think? There was quite a surprise in this whole deal with Korach. Was it the judgment of him ending up in the earth? I think it was a surprise to him and most people around. Remember what Moshe said is, if you die the death of a normal person, then the Father hasn't called us. But if the Father opens the earth and you'll be consumed in it, know then the calling of the Father is true. The earth opened, they were swallowed in. The people said, wow, now we follow you. And is that what happened? Not really. Not really. It is Moses' test. What was the initial test that Moses had? Can you remember the initial test that he had? Is he says to bring incense so that we can test who the ones are, the Levitical people, or the Levitical order is that needs to lead worship. That was his test. So we burn incense and bring our fire pans, and by this we shall know that it was Adonai who sent me and to do all these things, and that they are not of my own devising. I am not elevating myself before you. The Father has called myself, Moses, to do these things. If these, and then he says to the nation, if these men die as all men do, if their lot be the common fate of all mankind, it was not the Father who sent me. But if Adonai brings up something that was unheard of, so that the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up, with all that belongs to them, and that they will go down alive into Sheol, you shall know that these men have spurned Adonai, and Moses was right. What do you think is the natural reaction of a people like Israel in this case? What would have been the intended reaction? What would they say? Would they agree with Moses that this is right? Or would their hearts still be strengthened to say, whatever you're saying is wrong and we are turning around? They should agree with Moses. Do you agree? So, that should have been a good end to the story. Only not. This is not what happened. Because the very next day, think about the headlines in this camp, is Dathan and Abiram were swallowed with them, because they were camped right next to Korach. The earth opened its mouth, they were swallowed, it's closed, they were gone. I think that must have caused some shockwaves in the camp. It should have. I think this is, even for the nation of Israel, this is not normal. All right? You agree? The next day, the whole Israelite community grumbled against Moses, and you have killed the Lord's people, was the accusation. So where were their hearts at? Focused on our Father and His purposes and acknowledging Him as the one that's leading them? So our Father Himself intervenes. And what He says to Aaron is to take 12 staves, bring it before me, and then we will see who the Kohen is, the priests are. And you know the story, Aaron's rod budded, and the calling of Aaron's life as the priesthood was reestablished, reconfirmed. And because this happens in a way that was non-violent, that was ended up in the confirmation of Aaron, it ended up in a totally different spirit than the previous one. And our Father's word brought life and unity back into the camp. So how do we end conflict then? If we are in conflict, how do we deal with conflict then? It's difficult because Israel is going through a time of conflict at the moment. But how do we deal with this? Remember, Romans 2:9 says, there will be trouble and distress for every human being who does evil, first for the Jew and then for the Greek. So in the lives of the Israelites today, we know full well that things are very difficult. And it is a time of utter testing that the nation of Israel is going through. And it started in 2023, or it came to a climax in 2023, when Israel suffered one of the periods in their lives they were divided in the core. It was a time that was dramatic in terms of the division in Israel. But we know that our Father doesn't tolerate that, because our Father says that a house that's divided in himself will fall. So how do we find peace? How do we find peace in a people whose hearts are churned up and things are really in a very difficult place? The idea is to find peace in a community in a way that prevent harm, a greater harm, to befall a nation. And although what happened in Israel's lives brought quite a bit of harm in their lives, and it still do, I think there is the seeds of unity in Israel's lives that are forming more so than any time before. Just in September the 30th, a week before October the 7th, there was an ambassador to the UN in Israel that wrote a letter that was published in the Times, and he spoke about the division that is in Israel, that is at the highest level in a very long time. And he brought he mentioned Yoni, Bibi's brother, that were killed in Entebbe. Remember the raid in the 70s in Entebbe? And what the letter said of Yoni is he wrote in 1973, he wrote a message to his mom and dad, and he's saying, the wars of the Jews are always the ugliest. The Arabs won't need to fight us. The Jews will destroy themselves. And that was said at the Yom Kippur War. Is the division that was in the camp of Judah was equally prominent as it was in 2023. And we know that when Israel as a nation is divided, the Father intervenes. So what's happening? I think during 2023, there was a very fierce opposition in the government, and the leadership was just about to break up because of the judicial reforms and everything else. Remember, 2023, difficult days. So at the day of Simchat Torah, the climax of worship, a war broke out. And what is the result of Israel? Do we see the hearts of Israel turn towards the Father as in the days of Korach? Well, in the days of Moses, is it turned against our Father or for our Father? And as we are going forward, the fruit of these decisions will become more prominent in the lives of us as believers in the house of Israel, those that are for our Father and those that are against our Father. I think one of the benefits, one of the good things in our time is that the gray area is eliminated, progressively so. As we will be presented with choices, and the choices in the lives of the community, South African community, people across the world, will be one that's standing with our Father or against Him, with Israel or against Israel. And so I was wondering, when one of the biggest symbols in Israel at the moment, if you see a photo of Jerusalem, what do you see? You see the Golden Dome. If you look at a prominent photo of Israel, of Jerusalem, one of the known photos, you will see a photo of the Golden Dome, a place where the temple once stood. And I was wondering when the temple was destroyed. Remember, the temple was destroyed twice, but I think it wasn't really Babylon and Rome that destroyed the first and second temples. They were just a sledgehammer that we used to be able to do it. It happened much earlier. And it started from the days of Joseph. When the brothers of Joseph persecuted him, the division in the family started to happen. And the rift that started to form that was never really healed. In the days of Moses, as we see now in the time of Korach, the rebellion that started in people's hearts, was it completely healed? Or are they still divided in their core? Remember the house of Judah and the house of Israel split from each other after the reign of Solomon. They had wars against each other. It was a very difficult day, very difficult time. Rome was used in the days of Herod to finish the temple and to act as a sledgehammer to remove it from the face of the earth. So we are standing in days that we're expecting the coming of Messiah. Hopefully in our generation. But I think we are more and more convinced every day, I am, is that whatever we do in the earth, from our own strength, from our own political insight and our own wise thinking and everything else that happens, it is not going to work if it is without our Father's inspiration, His wisdom and His understanding, and without being focused on Messiah. Without that, we are going to go down into the pit of darkness of tribulation. That's where we're heading. So the Temple Mount faithful movement are making big efforts with all sorts of stories to try and to re-establish the temple. Through government influence and everything else is trying to re-establish the temple, but that's not the core issue. The core issue is the restoration of our hearts. And when we were I think I might have said it before, in 2019 when we stood on the Mount of Olives looking over the Temple Mount, thinking about when will that thing disappear and when is the coming of Messiah? Stan, who's our group leader, a lot of wisdom, and he says that is not the problem. That dome is not the problem, it's only a symbol. It's only a symbol of hardened hearts. And when the hearts of Israel changes, if our hearts can change, then that will disappear at the coming of Messiah. So when the collective Israel's hearts are changed and turned to our Father, then the political upheavals. Think of what's happening in Israel at the moment, politically and so forth. Israel is called as a light to the nations, as a light of the world. So are we. We are called to reflect the light of Messiah, to bring the Tikkun Olam, the reparation, the restoration of the earth. Okay? Tikkun Olam is the reparation of the earth. Yeah, interesting. When I was sitting in the Red Sea 8 years ago, and looking at Mecca, there was flashes of lightning in that area. And I asked the chief first officer on the ship. I said to him, "Do you know what that is?" He says, "It must be lightning." I said, "I don't think so. Look at the weather map. There's no clouds." The war in Mecca was already just 30 kilometers away from us in those days. And it's only escalating. There's something brewing that is going to escalate into a major occurrence. So in the earth today, not in this period, this is now after October the 7th, there are demonstrations globally. And you know who demonstrates? What do you think is demonstrating there? You see flags. You see flags of Palestine, etc. But you know who that is? That is, I can't read, International Jews Against Jewish Anti-Zionist Network. That is in England. In Tel Aviv, thousands demands Netanyahu resign. At the moment, 62,000 people from all yeshivas are said to go and fight in the war, and there are throwing stones at the police in riots and things that's happening. So is the spirit of Korach dead, or is it alive? I think the spirit of Korach is alive. In our generation, what can we do? And what is our calling as believers to make this go away? To bring unity, to bring a focus on our Father, and to live a life that's glorifying Him without being innerly focused on our own desires and whatever. Because one of the things that's said is of these 62,000 Orthodox young men that are in rebellion at the moment, is that people join that movement to escape the army service, military service. Is it focused on the greater good of Israel, on living a life on the worship of our Father, or on my own benefit? We had the same thing when I was in the army back in 82, is that there were a believing group that refused to do army service at that stage for their own good. So, in the US it says, not in our name, Jewish peace activists across the US are calling for action against what's happening in Israel. There is a choice for life and death in the life of first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. And we see this happening in the life of Israel at the moment, is that this choice is presented before them, and some are turning to life and light, and the others are not. And as this separation, this cliff is widening, so it will be in the nations. And we can see the elections we spoke about it in England this morning, in people that are making clear decisions. Is it going to be for our Father or against our Father? And I think we can expect this grey area, the grey mushiness of undecision, to be disappearing in the days ahead. What will be the only way forward to reach the goal which the Father has called us to? Matthew says, you will love our Father with all of your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, Yeshua answers. The second is like unto it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And if we can make choices for our Father and for each other in this time, looking away at our own experience, but focusing on what is good for the kingdom, then the choices to be made will be much easier. The thing is, how do we go forward? How do we go forward from that stop sign? It's quite difficult, and I think it will keep one busy for a while. It is impossible with our own wisdom. We can't discern the way forward for a grouping of people with diverse backgrounds and opinions to walk forward together. But throughout Israel's story, throughout the history of Israel, division was one of the biggest problems that they were sitting with and dealing with. There's only one way. Only one way forward. Something funny. Yeah. So all you can do, really, but you see, there is a prohibition on going back as well. So that is, you know what that stop sign. There's a scriptural premise for that stop sign. It's in the Psalms. Selah. Pause. That's what we do. So if we can be focused on the heart of the Father and get to a place in history where it becomes difficult to move, it's good. Don't move. Focus on what He says and know that He only will provide the answer how to go forward. Because the problem is that we can be easily focused on winning a war rather than to go forward with the Father's shalom in our hearts. And I think the story of Korach can be a very depressing story in terms of failure of Israel and where they happen to be. And are they really the light to the nations that they should be? But there is good news. And I think this is when we sang this morning the song of our Father's love will endure forever, it spoke to my heart, because the sons of Korach, think about what is your experience. Think of living, think a couple of years back at school days. Might be more for some, less for others. If something happened in your family, and if your surname was maybe Van der Merwe, I don't know, I can't think of an example now. It comes with baggage. There's something that comes with that. Pinar is, what's the first thing people say? Pinar kotse. You can expect certain things if your surname is well known. Korach was well known in the camp of Israel from the days that he was buried in the ground till today. One of the biggest rebellions. So, what will your experience in the camp be if you're a laity standing in the midst of your friends? Do you want to be known as a son of Korach? Huh? Do you think about it? You're a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old. What is your heritage? If your daddy or your granddaddy is the greatest rebel in the history of Israel, most probably. Korach acted against the family. He was a traitor to faithfulness. He was an opposer to our Father. Do we want to be a son of Korach? And I said, we know the answer, we know the outcome, so it's easy to say. But think of living a life in the camp the next day after the rebellion and for the next 40 years. How do you live without a positive outcome? People rejecting what happened with Korach, labeling or acknowledging that his rebellion brought great heartache. How do we live? So, in number 16, when Korach was judged, his sons is not mentioned. There is no mention of his sons, but they are mentioned in the final census in the wilderness, Numbers 26, next week's story. It says, and the sons of Eliav was Nemuel, Dathan, and Aviram. It was that Dathan and Aviram which were well known in the congregation, who strove against Moses and against Aaron in the company of Korach when they strove against Adonai. And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed him up together with Korach when that company died. And what time the fire devoured 250 men, and they became a sign. It was a sign. So Numbers 26:11 says, notwithstanding the children of Korach died not. Why didn't they die? They made a choice not to stand with the rebellion of their father. They stood aside. They distanced themselves from where their family was going. So they made an active choice in the wilderness when they saw this coming, like the Levites did. Remember the Levites at the golden calf? They stood away and said, we are standing for our Father. This was their choice. And to this day, that choice becomes a witness. Because the descendants of Korach ended to be, the prophet Samuel was a descendant of Korach. And we can understand why Hannah, his mum, interceded and prayed for our father, for a son, and thinking of all the problems that were associated with Korach throughout the generations up to when Hannah lived. Must have been overwhelming, living with a sticker on the back of your head, saying a son or a daughter of Korach. So Samuel was in Scripture known as a priest, a prophet, and a judge. He lived in all three of those offices. He was a son of Korach. The problem is his sons turned after their own gain, Scripture says. They turned away from the life of Samuel, because you can never live on your father's experience with as a believer and think you will reap the benefits of being a believer. You must make your own choice. Where do we stand with our father? Are we for him or against him? But Samuel's grandsons, they lived in the time of when the tabernacle of David was erected, when the tent of David was erected, and David in Chronicles brought a Levitical priesthood closer and allocated different orders to facilitate worship at the tent of David. So Samuel's grandsons turned away from their fathers and followed of Yotevave, our father, as the sons of Korach did. And in those days, they served the tabernacle or the tent, the worship, the fellowship, the things that happened around worshipping of our father in the tent of David. And they were set over the songs, the service of songs in the tabernacle. Korach's sons, the sons of the main rebel of the worship leader in the past, were set over the service of songs. The Chronicle says, and these are they that waited for the children of the sons of the Kohathites. Remember, it's the sons of Kohath, sons of the Kohathites. It was Heman, a singer, the son of Joel, the son of Samuel. Samuel was a believer. He followed in the way of our father. Joel, not so much. He was one of the sons that turned away. Heman was a singer. He was a grandson of Samuel. And he wasn't known as a son of the Kohathites. He decided to be known as a son of Korach in humility, saying, we are here and we stand against what happened to our great-grandfather. We are standing for our father. And they were known by their own choice as the sons of Korach. So Chronicle says what their purpose and their function was. They were to stand every morning and to thank and praise Adonai, and likewise at evening, and to offer all burnt sacrifices unto Adonai in the Sabbaths and in the new moons and on the feast days, by number and according to the command given unto them, continually before Adonai. And that they should keep charge of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the charge of the holy place, and the charge of the sons of Aaron the brethren, in the service of the house of our father. That's who they became. They were honored in Israel because of the choice that they made for our father, standing as a witness that the rebellion of Korach is not the end. What do we respond? What's our response if we see the people that's going ahead of us are standing in a rebellion, making proclamations against our father, against what we believe in? What's our responsibility? Your responsibility and mine is to go in the testimony of what Numbers says, is that the commandments of our Father will be written on our hearts, and that we will stand in obedience of loving, obeying, and clinging to our Father. That's what the sons of Korach did. 11 psalms are attributed to the sons of Korach. For example, Psalm 42:1 says, as the deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O Adonai. Psalm 46 is, Elohim is our refuge and our strength. Read it from the perspective of a son of Korach when they wrote it. Our God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in time of trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Yet we will believe and trust in our Father's name. So the story of Korach is actually a story of hope. It is that amidst darkness and amidst rebellion and things that's going wrong, look at the earth today. What's our responsibility and the potential of our decisions, where we can go? It's if we embrace the message of the sons of Korach, where they went and where their hearts turned to. They became the doorkeepers of the temple. They were in the northern and I think the eastern side of the temple as doorkeepers. So they were allocated a 2-weekly service by King David. And so when they come for the time of their service, they stand at the gates to the temple, and they were the singers. They were proclaiming the goodness and the glory of our Father, being the doorkeepers to the presence of the temple. And they were delighted to do so. Do you think Korach would have been? Because Korach didn't have that heart. They were grateful for the place that our Father has put them. They were the welcoming committee. Okay, they were the welcomers at the gate. And from that, when they go back after that 2-week service, if they go back and they walk to beyond the Galilee where they lived, I think they lived there, is what was in their minds. Let's read Psalm 84. This is Psalm 84. It is to the director on a gittith. What is a gittith? I think that's what Chris says. Gittith, the guitar. It is a stringed instrument. Only no, I think it is a far relative to a guitar. A psalm by the descendants of Korach, by the sons of Korach. How lovely are your dwelling place, O Yotevave of the heavenly armies. We're walking home after a 2-week service time in the temple, and we're thinking back of what happened during the rest of the year when we will be home. It says, how lovely are your dwelling places, O Yotevave of the heavenly armies. I desire and long for the temple courts of Adonai. My heart and body sing for joy to the living God. Even the sparrow found a house for herself, and a swallow for the nest to lay her young at your altar. Lord of the heavenly armies, my King and my God, how happy are those who live in your temple, for they can praise you continuously. It's then when you get to the stop sign. How happy are those whose strength is in you, whose heart is in your path. They will pass through the valley where he will prepare a spring for them. Even in the earthly rain, he will cover it with blessings. They will walk from strength to strength, and each will appear before the God in Zion. O Lord God of the heavenly armies, hear my prayer. Listen, O God of Jacob. God, look at our shield and show favor to your anointed. For a day in your temple courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather stand at the entrance of God's house than live in the tent of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and a shield. The Lord grants grace and favor, and the Lord will not withhold any good thing from those who walk blamelessly. O Lord of the heavenly armies, how happy are those who trust in you. So I trust as we read, I think if we can reread Psalm 84 and recognize how much restoration has happened in the lives of these people from a place of brokenness where Korach comes from. The healing and the beauty that the Father brings in our lives and the potential that He can bring to us if we submit to Him with hearts that are broken for Him and hearts that are focused on who our Father is and the purpose and the calling that He has called us to live in this part of the world. I think we will be overwhelmed with who our Father is in our lives, motivated to go together forward in proclaiming Him as the goodness and His mercy in our lives. So, Father, help us to walk in the time that You've set before us. Help us to walk from strength to strength. Father, hear our prayer in this time as we look to You for a answer in many people's lives who go through time of difficulty and through times of tribulation in these days. Father, You are our shield and our strength. And it's only in You that we can find an answer to the problems that lies in the world today. The brokenness, the division, hearts that are turned away from each other. Father, it's only when we follow you and worship you in spirit and in truth and encourage one another as you call us to do when we can find the answer. You are a sun and a shield, and it's you that grants grace forever. Father, you will not withhold any good thing from those who walk blamelessly. Happy are those who trust in you. And we want to stand together as a community today, Father, and we want to ask you, in the place that you have called us to live, help us to live a life that can resemble the restoration that we see in the lives of the sons of Korach. Help us to live a life that's a reflection of your Son, Yeshua, so that we can bring the tikkun olam, the restoration in people's lives that you call us to live. As we said earlier, let the lights that shine not be lights of conflict and war, but let the light that shine from our lives be one of love and of compassion and the truth of your kingdom. Help us to make a stand for your kingdom in the days that we live in the area that you have called us to live. Thank you for the opportunities that you've placed before us in these days. Thank you for the testimony of Korach, that we can see, although it started out in brokenness and with heartache and despair, when a nation was filled with hopelessness. And then after that, Father, because of your intervention and because your love endures, the sons of Korach can have a testimony of who you are. We praise you and we thank you, Father, because your love endures forever, even our lives. We thank you and we praise you in the name of Yeshua. Amen.